Hey everyone, Kelly here, and today I would like to talk about the books I read in June. And June was my Get Things Done month. I ended up finishing 13 books, and part of that was because I had already started a lot of them. So I often will pick up a book, start reading it, get like a third of the way, like get a good chunk in, and then be like, I'm in the mood for something else. And then I set it down, and sometimes I set it down for months. And I just decided that it was like halfway through the year that I was just gonna clean off a lot of those books that I had gotten partway through. And so at least I think 5 of these are books that I had started earlier. One of them I had started in November of last year, a couple in January, one in April. So like some of them have been sitting there for a while unfinished. And then I had a couple others that I also was reading and just didn't get done in June. Like I have one that only have 50 pages left in July. So I'm getting all of my kind of partway through books finished, so I could start July kind of fresh for the second half of the year. But just because I was like finishing things doesn't mean they were bad things. Like I still liked everything. In fact, when I was looking at my ratings, I gave almost everything I read 4 stars. I had a few things I didn't rate, and then I had 1 5-star. So actually, even though I sat them down, I wasn't disliking them. So I don't know why I do that. It just happens. So this time I'm going to start with my 5-star because I don't have a physical copy of it. Talk about all my 4 stars and then end up with the ones that I wasn't rating because they're maybe less than popular. They're things, there's some graphic novels at the end, mostly is what my non-rated ones were. Okay, so first of all, my 5-star read this month was a nonfiction. I had this as a Libro FM arc from Libro FM, I can get some free audiobooks, and this one was actually from last year, I believe, is when I got the arc, and I never finished it or never started it, and so I read it now, and it's called Period, The Real Story of Menstruation by Kate Clancy, and this was so good, and I would definitely recommend it. It's not very long. I think it was like a 5-hour audiobook, and so our author is a sociologist, and like one of her focuses is menstruation and kind of, how it's changed over time and how it has affected humans and our interactions and all that over time, and how it became kind of a big secret, like nobody wants to talk about periods or anything in public, and this one was super informative. I learned a lot, and I also was very frustrated about how little we are taught about our own bodies and what it goes through. And so I'm glad I read this and learned a lot of information, but I also am like, why aren't we teaching much more, and why isn't there more research about menstruation and all that, and its effects? I mean, there's so many things that we didn't know about until more recently because studies just weren't done. And so it's like kind of gave me a little righteous anger, but also very informative, and I would highly recommend it, especially if you are someone who menstruates. And now I started my pile with like some of the books that I have had sitting there for a long time that I was partly reading, and still gave 4 stars. So still enjoy these even though I put them down. So I have Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. This is the Haymitch's story, the prequel. And I think I kept putting it down because the pacing of this is okay. So the original Hunger Games books, I feel like the pacing was really fast, but it always was that there's like a little beginning and then you get to be in the arena, and once you're in the arena, it's like speeds through. This one, it's a pretty long time before you get to the arena, and I just kept putting it down, and then once we were there, I was just like finishing it in a day. So I think it really was that it was just the prep stuff, because we've already had like 4 books that I had already read, and I was kind of done with the prep stuff and just wanted to see Haymitch's arena story. But obviously there was more to it, and we had to learn about his reaping and like all the stuff that was happening to kind of build up to his time in the arena and all that. So it makes sense to all be in there. It just pacing was off for me. I really enjoy Haymitch as a character. I do think that this, compared to the other prequel, actually does add to the story and gives us more about like how Haymitch became who he was, and then kind of the beginnings of the rebellion and all that stuff. So I think that was a good prequel, where I felt like Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes was not a great prequel. And maybe it was because I was in Snow's Head, which I did not want to be, and at least here we're with a character that I enjoy. The next one that I started in January of this year was Her One Regret by Donna Freitas, and I did actually ended up going back to the beginning and restarting this one because I felt like I didn't remember as much, where I didn't like restart Sunrise on the Reaping. And this one is about a woman who, at the very beginning, the first like prologue kind of chapter is that she's with her baby out grocery shopping, and then people find the baby alone in the parking lot and no mother. And so part of it is that several months before, she had told her best friend that she regretted becoming a mother. And so then her best friend is like, did my friend just leave and just take off and leave her baby, or did she actually get kidnapped? And so there's that kind of back and forth of like people villainizing her and saying that she just left and she just took off and all that, and then people being like, she could still have been kidnapped even if she had this regret. And so this is really, it's kind of billed as a thriller, mystery thriller, but really it's more just a literary fiction kind of analyzing motherhood and people, you know, the different feelings that you go through of like, it's not all, you know, sunshine and rainbows, that there are like people that have regrets about being mothers. And I think the author's note actually would have been nice to be at the beginning, because this is an author that has chosen not to have children, and she's constantly being asked, when are you going to have kids? Why don't you want to have children? Like, and it's just like a thing that in society people do, even though why not? Like, if she's saying she doesn't want to have kids, then leave her alone. And I think this was at her analyzing, like, what if I did have children after I said I don't want them, and then I end up regretting having them? And so this was kind of like her way of putting that into a story. I thought this was really good. This has terrible ratings. I think a lot of people, because they went into it wanting a mystery thriller, and it isn't that really till the very end of the book. It is much more literary, so maybe it was expectations, but I thought it was good themes that it was talking about. I did like the mystery portion of like what happened to her and all that stuff. So I thought there was a lot of good things still happening in here. Just know going into it, keep your expectations out of this being like an actual thriller. And then one that I actually started more recently, this one was just from April. I think this was on my April TBR, and I finished it in June, and that's The Favorites by Lainey Fargo. And this one is about two ice dancers, and the reason I had put this down is because it gets very repetitive, which makes sense because we're following these people as they go through several different like Olympic, you know, sequences where they're trying to get to the Olympics, and then whether they do or not, and then you have to start over and you go through all the different competitions. So there is like repetitiveness because you always have like the worlds and the like, I don't know, I don't remember all the different competitions, but yeah, you're repeating some of the same competitions over again as they get older and more experienced, and different partners and different things happening, and the drama. This is very dramatic because it's got all the like stuff that is like happening when you are high competitive, like kind of in a highly skilled competition, and that you're working really hard every day, and working closely with another person, like, you know, because it's a partner sport instead of a whole team, so it's like two people and their interactions. And then there was also like the people that they directly were competing with and the people that they train with and all that stuff. So, and it's very big, so that would probably be my one complaint, is that it was repetitive and very long, but I still was really interested in watching how that works, of like how, you know, the work to get to the Olympics, all the like politics that are involved in that, all of the drama between both you and the coaches and your other teammates and your partner. And yeah, so I still thought it was an interesting, good read. And then I have We Will Rise Again, which is edited by Karen Lord, Annalee Newitz, and Malka Older, and this is a collection of speculative short stories and some interviews. The project of this is really interesting and what drew me to it, and so it's basically stories about protest and resistance and hope. And the way that the editors did this is they brought in actual activists and did interviews with them, with the like other authors, and then also like had the authors like I think they had them like pair up with activists and actually talk to them and learn from them so that they could base their stories off of some of the things from the activists. And you can see that there's one point where there's an interview in here with some activists, and they're talking about the different things that they have done, and you see some of the stories coming directly from some of those things, like you can see hints of them, where they were getting inspiration. And so I thought that the project of this was really good. But like any short story collection, there were some that I wasn't interested in. And so I had started this back in January, and I was like loving it for the introduction. The introduction itself was 5 stars, and then like the first couple stories were really good, and then I hit like a couple stories in a row that were like mid, or I wasn't that interested in, and so then I put it down for a long time because I kind of struggled, and then I had a couple times where I picked it up and read one story and didn't like it, and then in the second half got back to stories I really liked again, and so then the second half was much more interesting to me. So it just had kind of a middle that weren't my favorite stories. But I would recommend this because I think it's a great project and brings up some interesting stuff in our current, political climate. And it is a newer book. Like, I think it just came out in November of last year, so it is current. Then I have Rebel Witch by Kristen Ciccarelli, and this is the end of a duology. I had read the first book, I think, in December. It was one of the last books I read in 2025. And this one is just like definitely young adult, lots of dramatic, where it's like the hate to love, where he's a witch hunter and she's a witch, and this just continues that storyline. I didn't like this one quite as much as the first one. I think the plot in this one dragged a little bit, and there was a lot of like the same thing happening over and over again, the same kind of push and pull. But I do like the overall story and how it ended up, and because I was kind of feeling, how are you going to finish this off? There's so much hate between the two groups. How are you going to finish this off in 2 books? But I think the way that she ended up finishing off was good and satisfying. And so if you just want like kind of I would call this more of a fluff read, because yes, it has some like deeper themes, but it's mostly like focused on the romance a lot more than the political themes, in my opinion, and kind of like the background and trauma of these two people and them coming together in that. And then I have Vampires of El Norte by Isabel Cañas, and I had read The Hacienda, really enjoyed it, so I was looking forward to another one by her, but I don't like vampires, so when it first came out, I wasn't interested. And then I heard a lot of people reviewing and not liking it because it didn't have enough vampires, and I was like, oh, well, now I'm interested, because I don't actually like the vampires. So in this one, the vampires are just a metaphor basically for, the, colonization, and so that makes it a lot more interesting to me than actual vampires. And there are actual vampires, but like not as on every other page, like it's not as much of a focus as the colonialism is. And this is taking place in Mexico during, I don't know, when is this, in the 1840s. And there are people from the north that are coming in and trying to take over their land and their haciendas and all that stuff, and there's war, the way she does this, she always does kind of gothic horror stories that are very light on the horror and heavy on the romance. And this is the same. We are following a woman whose father owns the hacienda or whatever, and she had a friend growing up that he worked on their land, and so they were never really going to be able to be like married or anything. There are different levels, and then he thinks that she dies, and so he leaves and goes somewhere else because he doesn't want to live without her. And it turns out she didn't die, and they end up both at the same place later on, and kind of she's obviously mad at him for just leaving because he was her best friend growing up. And so there's that like romantic relationship going on at the same time as vampires and war and all that. So that one was fun. And then I continued a graphic novel series. This is Lightfall, A Place Between by Tim Probert, and this is book 4 in Lightfall series. I'm a little worried because this is the most recent one that came out just this year, and I don't see when the next one's gonna come out. And I had read all 4 of these in a row, and so now I'm like, am I gonna have to reread them, or am I gonna just end up giving it up? Because if it doesn't come out for another 2 years, I'm gonna forget everything that happens. But overall, this is a 4-star series for me. I really enjoy kind of following our main character and how her anxiety is like shown on the page and represented in the art, but that she still is like being brave and fighting through the things she's scared about. And yeah, this is just kind of a quest series. And then I had a book series I'm starting with my daughter. I have read the first like 4 books in the series several years ago, and now I'm restarting them and reading them with my oldest. This is Keeper of the Lost Cities by Shannon Messenger. I think there are like 9 books in the series now. We're already almost done with book 2 at this point. I had originally given this 5 stars when I read it like 5 or 6 years ago, and now I've moved it down to 4 stars. I still think it's good, but I listened to it on audio this time, and I think listening to an audio, I hear a lot of the repetition, and I swear, you know, like that phrase that people always used to say was in young adult novels, the like, she let out her breath, she didn't know she was holding. That was literally in this book like 10 times. And I noticed it as I was listening to it. And so then it was like driving me nuts, that not just because that used to be a thing in books, but that like it was used so many times. It wasn't as good as like I remember it being, but I still think it's a good middle grade adventure story, following a girl who doesn't know that she's not really human, that she's an elf. And so she learns that at the beginning and kind of gets pulled into this elf world and has these magical powers and stuff like that. And I think, you know, like overall in this series, it's like kind of how she is going to be like kind of the chosen one, figuring out the next steps. So those were all my 4-star books. And now these last ones I did not rate. Most of them are graphic novels. Actually, are all of these graphic novels? So one of the things I am doing is kind of like my own history study over the last couple of years. And as part of that, I'm reading this book, The Cartoon History of the Universe by Larry Gonick. This is volume, like the first omnibus, volumes 1 through 7 are together. And I've just been reading this over a course of like a year as I'm going through the study. And this one starts with the Big Bang and goes until Alexander the Great. And the thing is, these were written a long time ago. I think these might have been like, are they from the 80s or something like that? Oh, 1990, so kind of close to that. And so outdated in a lot of the like political correctness and like the way some people are illustrated and things like that. And a lot of kind of misogyny kind of things going on in here. So if you were to pick this up, keep that in mind. It's definitely, you know, over 30 years old. But it is like kind of it is a funny version of kind of overall history. So really umbrella kind of history and with a comic kind of flair to it. So I still liked reading it, but I didn't rate it because I couldn't give it a high rating with a lot of the portrayal of women in it. And then I was doing Herked, which is like the hardest reading challenge you ever do, and it was finishing up and I needed to kind of fill in some spots, so I was reading some graphic novels to fill in some spots, which is not cheating because, you know, you can use any size book, but I just wanted to be able to complete that challenge, and I ended up picking up some things that I wouldn't have picked up, and I'm glad I did. I didn't rate them, but I'm glad I picked them up. This is Dancing After 10. It's a graphic memoir by Vivian Chung and Georgia Weber. And part of the reason I didn't rate this is because I just don't know how to rate somebody's memoir. And this one was really informative and actually like really affecting. So I would recommend this one. I just didn't want to rate it. But in this one, Vivian, she was an artist. She was a graphic designer and artist. And then on a trip, she takes a medication, and that medication leads to this her getting 10, which is like this basically where taking like something like ibuprofen makes your whole body like attack itself. And so like she ended up having like itching all over her body, and then her skin was kind of like peeling off, and then she had like basically had to get skin grafts like a burn victim, like, and so there was scarring all over her body. And due to that, she ended up losing her sight. And since she was an artist, it was like her figuring out what to do after that, after losing her sight. And part of this is that she's illustrating this as she's losing her sight. So that's what's really interesting. And then she brought in Georgia Weber to finish it, so you can like see sometimes the ones that are drawn by her that are kind of more squiggly and hard, not as clear. Yeah, I don't want to like get farther into it to like show ones, but you can see as the evolution of the ones done by Vivian, and as they get like less clear, the art gets less clear as she's losing her sight, and then she brings in Georgia Weber to finish it, and so you can see the differences in the art. But like, and then they tell you how they do it at the end, where they really worked in partnership. Georgia really like described every panel she was drawing and changed it as Vivian wanted it to, so it was Vivian's memoir, but was finished the drawings by somebody else. So I would recommend this if you want to read about a disability I'd never heard of. And then I read Sugartown by Hazel New Levant, and this one was for one of the LGBTQ plus prompts, and I needed to read something about polyamory, and I just didn't know what I wanted to read, and then I heard about this little graphic novel. I did not realize how short it was. It's only like 50 pages, like it's like really short. And I kind of wish this had been longer, because I think that would have been more of a plot, but basically it's just this person Hazel meeting this other person while she was visiting Portland, and them starting a relationship, and then how that works with her boyfriend back home and all that. Nothing like wrong with this. I mean, I think it's a way to like learn. I think she wrote this specifically to kind of teach, because it's like really laying out like kind of ground rules and all that stuff. So it felt like more of a teaching graphic novel than an actual like plot and romance. So I think I would have preferred it to be more longer and like an actual story. But yeah, if you want just an introduction, then go ahead and pick that up, but it's super short. And then the last thing I read was MFK by Nyla Magruder, which is, I had picked it up as like about disability, but then I ended up reading Dancing After 10 for Herc Ed, but then I had this one off in the library, so I figured I would finish it, because our main character is deaf and has hearing aids, but this is like a fantasy. So, and this one, I didn't read it because I didn't feel like a complete story, and it says that it's book 1, but it's written in like 2017, so I don't think there's going to be a book 2. And I think if I knew there was a sequel, I would have rated this and given it a higher rating, but knowing that this might be it, just didn't feel like a full story, because we're following this girl who shows up in this village, and this village is being attacked by people with special abilities on a regular basis, and kind of like what she's going to do to help the village or whatever. But yeah, it feels like an incomplete story, so that's why I didn't rate it. But I liked the art, and I liked what there was of the story. I was gonna like just show you the art, but I didn't want to like give any spoilers or anything. But yeah, so if this ever had a book 2, maybe I would actually rate it and recommend it more, but it didn't feel complete. So that's it. So lots of things that I read in June, lots of things that I liked and just needed to finish and finally focus on. And I'm feeling a lot better going into the second half of the year, that I am finishing one of my other ones up, and then I have another, kind of the last 2 that are like ones I had started. I'm hoping also to like finish up in the next couple weeks, so I can really be more keeping my currently reading a shorter amount. And that's it for me. If you want to talk about any of these, I'd love to hear from you down below, and I'll see you next time. Bye.